Okay, Mr. Mayor, we are live and ready.
All right, sounds good. We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. It's a meeting of the Seldovia City Council, Wednesday, March 27th, 2024. Time is 4:02 p.m. This is a work session. Couple topics tonight. First one is FY25 budget special revenue fund overview. And the second item B2 is water and sewer rates. And we'll go ahead and let staff kick it off.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just going to share my screen here real quick. And we'll do a quick overview and then we can get more into the discussion of water and sewer rates. Just to start off, these numbers are all preliminary. We're starting to get towards the end where things are a little more finalized, but they do change. I wouldn't say daily at this point, but weekly there are still some changes. But so this is a kind of just an initial overview of where we are. They're probably a little bit more solidified, but there could still be change. And if I go to presentation mode here. Okay, so we have our large general fund, which we'll talk about in the next meeting or in an upcoming meeting, but then we have our special revenue funds, water, wastewater, which is sewer, dock, harbor, and boat haul out, which we call BHO. It's a little rough agenda. We'll do an overall recommendations, and we'll talk about the revenues and expenditures by fund size, audit allocations that are being recommended, that are implemented for FY25, and then each fund itself. And for those overall recommendations, we are recommending a reallocation of the audit expenses, some software expenses, and general expenses that cross all funds to follow an allocation method by fund size. Recently, in the last couple of years, the allocation for the audit shifted and it was equally distributed across funds. So general fund, water, sewer, harbor, boat haul out, and dock. However, after seeing that pattern for a couple of years, we could really see where those smaller funds, dock and BHO specifically, and especially keeping in mind that dock is a non-major fund, carrying the same burden of the audit as the rest of the funds, was really negatively impacting. So I'll show in a couple of slides what that'll look like, but we are trying to do a more generalized method that takes into account what the size of each fund. 1.7% CPI and COLA increase across all the funds, a 4% health insurance increase is what our quote is from our insurance carrier, 10% for general liability insurance. They said that they don't have it ready yet, but they said we should anticipate a 10%. And we needed to remove the 3% credit card fee. We were never able to implement that when we went to do the initial implementation. We realized that there was a lot more hoops and red tape to jump through that we just weren't prepared for. So that's been completely removed from the budget, and it'll be removed from the fee schedule. And there could be an additional consideration of an admin fee per transaction if you guys wanted to look into that in the future. The original intent of the credit card fee was to capture that we have about $7,500 in credit card expenses annually. But with the way that works with the companies, we just weren't able to implement that. And you'll see the justifications on the right. So this just gives you kind of, when we talk about fund size and we look at a 3-year average, our general fund is about 54% of our revenues and about 54% of our expenses. And that does include this year's schedule or this year's draft so far. So everything else remains relatively similar for revenues versus expenses. And if you guys have questions during any of this, just let me know. And then when we talk about the audit expenses, so for FY24, you can see here that it had shifted a little bit. It was 24% general fund, 16 water, 14 wastewater, 14 dock, 18 harbor, and 14 BHO. And if you looked down at the spreadsheet below, you'll see that those amounts were 8,900 or more. And looking across for the FY25 recommendations, if we use that fund size that we just saw in the last slide, 54% general fund, 16 water, 7 wastewater, 3 dock, 17 harbor, and 3 boat haul out. It will increase the general fund by $19,000. At this point in time, I'm confident that the general fund can take that. And as it is our largest fund, it does have the largest portion of the audit to cover it, or the most work is, a lot of the work is done for the general fund and administration, payroll, all of those things. Water, it also increases by $30, and then you'll see a little bit of a decrease in the other additional funds, or for boat haul out and dock, it's actually a $7,000 decrease. And then as we go through the slides, any questions on that? Well, before we hit each fund? Okay, so then when we're going to go through each fund itself, we have our water special revenue fund. This is a 5-year overview, and this keeping in mind for all of these that we do not have our FY23 audit yet. We are finally seeing some of that draft financial statement, and it's supposed to be coming through any day now. But at this point in time, the FY23 numbers are just an estimate based on our finance report. Our end of year finance report, we find that it is fairly close. It was the previous year, but there will be some shifting once we receive the audit. The FY23 numbers also are high because they included the $36,000 transfer. Those revenues was a $36,000 transfer from the ending fund balance to the budget, and that was because we were in the red. So you'll see as an overview of all the funds, like I said, they're looking all right. Water and sewer are looking a little bit better, but we do, in the finance report you'll see tonight, it's going to show, so the sewer is just a little bit in the red, and that's because we retro bill. So if we had March's billing included in the finance report, we would be back in the black. But we are always writing this line with water and sewer that they're close. And should there be any major incidents like we have with the sewer lift station, that adds an additional burden. And they're really tight. There's not a lot of margin of error for either one. So, and you can see here with even the FY25 draft budget right now, we're looking at a little less than a $3,000 difference. With the expense sheet, this just gives you a breakdown of where we are now. And I wanted to point out that the overhead for the water treatment plant is about $96,000, and that's without employee wages. So you're looking at your operational supplies, which is mainly the chemicals that are needed to operate the plant, testing. We have about $16,000 in contract services that includes testing. Equipment, we included $4,000 additional dollars in equipment for geo bags. We need to purchase 2 new geo bags so that we can finish draining our clarifier. And then there's a little bit in there for vehicle maintenance. Our utilities are $25,000 plus insurance, $11,000, audit $10,000. So a lot of big ticket numbers. Those credit card fees and software fees add up to about $8,000. And then FY25, we are due for a dam inspection. So that comes every 3 years. A portion of that dam inspection is allocated to water, that $3,500, and then an additional $1,800 is allocated to sewer. So for considerations for FY25 water, I just wanted to point out to date, we're at $154,000 in expenses and our revenues are $166,000. So we're doing all right. And as long as we don't go backwards as the years progress, I think we'll be able to see this more as we budget. Right now, we're still catching up. $3,500, like I said, was allocated for the dam, an additional $450 for training. We know we are going to be looking at trying to hire a new water operator, as well as we want to continue to provide training for our assistant water operator, who's Radzi. And then, as I said, the 4,000 for the equipment. Repairs, maintenance, and outside labor costs were kept low. Community assistance program funds were not allocated this year, but they have in the past. Last year, we allocated $10,553 for FY24. And in FY23, we did that fund balance transfer. So we're not having to do that, and we're still meeting the end. We're still meeting our expenses, but it's definitely something to continue to hold in the back of our minds that it won't take much to offset that. As a large major fund, the audit reallocation really has very minimal impact. And then there's some future considerations, which I don't think we're there yet, but would be nice to be in the future. We do have a small water and sewer rate study to discuss this evening. Then things we've talked about in the past are implementing a senior discount, considering water and sewer incentives for businesses. We will discuss other incentive ideas in the future, but maybe water and sewer is not the right option at this point. It's still something we could consider. I know our public works would really love if there was a way we could reinstate a smaller fee for a maintenance fee to encourage customers to shut off their water during the winter season. We've talked about water meters once a long time ago. And with the recent state of the dock, that was always a consideration that the AMHS water revenue could move to dock instead, since that's where that transaction takes place. That's about $14,000. But I wouldn't recommend it at this time. Any questions on water?
I have one question, and it's slightly off topic of this, but just as we're saying how close we are, since we know we're going to be looking at needing to hire a new head operator for the water. What if, because that is a specialized person, what if we don't find somebody? Is that cost look different? Like, what do we do if we have a time when we don't have somebody in there? And what does that cost look like?
That's an excellent question. So right now we have an alternative method of supervision, an AMOS plan on hand, and our assistant water operator does have a provisional water 1. DEC will work with us if our primary operator needs to be certified for level 1, and that's something that we could probably implement in the next year. And then as long as we can maintain our AMOS, we will have oversight from somebody in Homer, from Todd. He's our overall supervisor, and he has the certifications that we need. So that's helpful, but we still need the bodies to be able to operate the plant. And knowing that, I can imagine that wages I couldn't actually estimate if wages would go down or not, because there could be more time,
Right.
even if it's less of a wage to initially start, because all of these certifications and trainings require hours,
Okay.
hours.
Yeah.
And if we look at hiring somebody next week to be training with a current operator, they'll be shadowing. And so everything will be double hours for what they do. So it's hard to guess what that's going to look like in wages at the end. But for certification will be covered.
Okay. So I guess my only question on this is, knowing that that is a iffy, is if this can be budgeted on that conservative side, even if it doesn't look as pretty, because you said that other things can also shift a little bit, but since that's something we know that has a potential of shifting one way or the other, like if we run those figures of some scenarios and put it in at, I don't want to say worst case scenario, but at the higher end, just so we're looking at that as we're looking at the whole picture.
Yeah. It's fairly conservative now, but I can definitely run some more scenarios, and I think that's a really good suggestion. We can maybe include some additional wages just to cover any incidents that may occur with that. Anything else? Okay. Wastewater then. So wastewater, again, FY 23 looks high because there was a $40,000 transfer from the ending funded balance to ensure that that fund stayed in the black. And that has a lot to do with our DCR best practice score and future funding opportunities. So we really want to ensure that these funds stay in the black as much as possible. Administrative wages were reallocated in FY 24, which also and that should say FY 23, I apologize. Oh, no, reallocated in FY 24, reducing expenses in FY 23. So that's why the expenses go from 127 back down to 100,000. We just see the CPI increase and some smaller adjustments for FY 25 revenues of 104,000. And that's kind of very consistent with the previous years, but with the exception of FY 23, where we saw that administration allocation. So we took that back out. FY 24, FY 25 remain fairly in line with FY 21 and FY 22. And again, very close. You can see in FY 21 and FY 22, our revenues did not meet our expenses, and those are audit actuals. So I don't think that's going to be the case for FY 23 and moving forward. But again, very close. And without that transfer, we would have been in the black, or would have been in the red again for FY 23. So those wastewater expenses look like, an overhead for just the sewer utility being 41,000. Then we have our employee wages on top of that. There are some administration thrown in each fund, which we've gone through a few times in the office and do feel like when it comes to staff time, those are fairly consistent allocations out per fund. So no super big surprises. Except we all want to keep in mind for FY 25 considerations that the septic lift station is failing, which could indicate an increase in wages, repairs, maintenance, equipment, operating supplies. We do anticipate having funding for that project. I have a call with DEC tomorrow so that we can figure out how to move ahead with the project and still receive funding. There's a little bit of a holdup because the funding includes two phases, the septic lift station and some I&I for the overall sewer. So I'm asking them to split it in two so that we can move ahead with the septic lift station and then address the I&I at a later date. We did get an initial assessment back after having a company visit and do an inspection of our lift station, and it ended up being a lot higher than anticipated because there's some additional maintenance that's needed to happen to the septic tank with the replacement of valves in order to even do the work in the lift station. So that with the base pedestal and parts that need to be ordered, we're looking at about 75,000. And I'll have more updates on that funding in the near future. We are going to start seeing some of those expenses. We ordered the base pedestal already. We're, have some of the parts on hand or ordered. So we're going to start actualizing some of those expenses and may need to look at doing an ordinance to shift some of the major maintenance and repair fund to the sewer funds to keep it ahead. But I'll know more once I talk to DEC and when that funding will be released. So hopefully tomorrow I'll know more. 1,800 was budgeted in sewer capital projects for the dam inspection as of March. And this is what I was talking about. March 20th, expenses were at 72,000 and revenues were at 70,000. So really close, a little bit in the red there. Audit fees were decreased from 8,980 to 4,500 with the allocation method that was shown previously. Otherwise, the other expenses remain fairly static, and the usage fees for the budget were increased 1.7% based on the February 2024 Anchorage CPI. With the current recommended changes, the wastewater budget will not require a transfer from the ending fund balance, but that depends on council implementation, finalization of annual expenses, and status of the infrastructure, so that can change. Any questions on wastewater? Okay. I'll keep carrying through. So dock. You can see dock has had a pretty ugly pattern of the last 4 years of having expenses that have not met the revenue, or the revenue has not met the expenses, I should say. We are going to see a shift this year. The majority of dock revenue and expenses is depends on AMHS ports of call. However, let's see, we'll look at the expenses here real quick. Overhead for the municipal dock, not including employees, is 17,000. Employee wages really are the largest chunk, and that's because that's our revenue source, is the ferry, and that depends on our ferry crew and our employees. So we have $36,000 budgeted for expenses for employees, and that's because we are anticipating 90 stops. We'll have about 104 stops for FY23. Sorry, FY24, FY23 had about 77. So it can shift very fast depending on the ferry coming. Administration was able to negotiate a 23% wage increase for the ferry crew and 50% increase for ferry stops from $200 to $300 a stop. This is a really significant change and a big reason why we're going to see the fund hopefully continue to have the revenues meet expenditures moving forward. The city still supplements a small portion of employee benefits and wages especially for the ferry agent and line handler increase. However, it's not as significant of a subsidy as it was in previous years. And the ferry stop increase covers the additional cost to the city, and even if the phone increases, it'll cover that and then a little bit more as well. So that was a big thing for the city to have that increase. We have $1,000 included in the budget for repairs and maintenance. Hopefully that will cover some of the crane repair and painting. Audit fees were decreased from $8,980 to $1,950. That's also a really significant increase, change. And we are allocating 5% of the SFL rents to the dock, and that's $1,397 annually, but every little bit helps. The reason why it's low is because we also took 20% in the general fund and are putting that away to save for the next roof repair that's needed. Not this one, but future ones. The dock fund, and I apologize, this is an error. I should say the dock fund has actualized a loss for the past 5 fiscal years with an increase in charges for ferry stops and SFL rent allocation. The dock is anticipated to have a balanced budget for FY25. And it was supposed to say, however, the dock balance remains in the black. So even though we have a loss for the last 5 years, and we keep depleting the ending fund balance, it still remains that this still has assigned funds over what's being used. It's getting really close to depleting those. So this is a big thing that we're moving in the right direction. And hopefully we can continue to do so, so that we aren't truly in the red and having to find money from other sources to cover that dock. With current recommended changes, the municipal dock does not include a revenue allocation from community systems program, as was done in FY22 and FY24. And as I stated for water, that could be something to look at in the future, is if we wanted to split or reallocate some of those AMHS water revenues to the dock. But at this point in time, I think that really depends on the health of the water fund. Any questions on dock? Okay. Harbor. Harbor's been really fun this year. We're loving Harbor. So Harbor, you can see remains fairly consistent across the 5 years. And again, FY23 was high, and I believe that included, oh yes, it'll talk about that on the next page. You'll see, oh, in 2 pages that's FY 21, 22, 23, and 24 actually contained some community assistance funding, as well as transfers from the Jackloff Bay Dock deferred revenue. That's that harbor CIP improvements to cover expenses for Jackloff. And FY 23 and FY 24 included transfers from the Harbor Major Maintenance and Repair Fund to cover some repairs. I don't think we're going to see that in the audit. I don't think we're going to see that actualized because we ended up utilizing port fee for those improvements to the harbor instead. So with harbor expenses, I didn't do a breakdown of overhead for harbor because that's a little bit more difficult to do for this fund. It does have a lot of fluidity and there are a lot of improvements being scheduled. Harbor revenue also, or Harbor Special Revenue Fund also includes revenues and expenses for Jackloff Bay Dock, as said, employee wages and benefits for summer employees and extended hours over the weekends for the harbor office. So some of that overhead for expenses includes Jackloff Tidelands lease. They have 19 fire extinguishers that they switch out a couple every year, regular maintenance and repair. And if we go to the next page, I can give you some more examples of what they're doing. The harbor master is allocated across several funds, and that's because she does a lot of work, especially well, I was gonna say especially in the winter, but really year round, working with Public Works and doing special projects for the city. That's something that is just invaluable, and we really appreciate that she steps up and takes those on. Travel and per diem is increased a little bit due to inflation and the change in allocation across the funds. We put in $3,000 per request from Public Works for a trailer for the harbor skiff. It's been a challenge pulling it in and out of the water. And that was a request that it have some place for it to sit and be stored during the winter. There's a decrease in fishing game licenses, but that's a pass-through account for expense and revenue, which is another reason why you see a decrease in expenses and revenues. 14,000 was budgeted for capital projects, utilizing the anticipated port fee revenue and FY 23 assigned fund balance for the port fee. And I'll show you what that looks like here in a second. That 14,000 includes 7,500 for the replacement of 5 more finger pins, updated signage, lighting of the flagpole, repainting of the harbor sheds, and other beautifying efforts. Since 2021, 19 finger pins have been replaced out of 53. We're scheduled to do 5 more, hopefully before July 1, the end of fiscal year. And then I know that the harbor master has been working with Arc and Fire, who's been doing those repairs, to maybe even turn around and do 5 more right after that at the beginning of the next fiscal year. So where was I at with that? So that's out of 53. Might have 10 more done potentially. Additionally, we would like to explore budgeting 10,000 for carpenter hours to begin replinking and repairing harbor fingers this summer. Those funds are available through the port fee for harbor improvements. In FY 24, that port fee was increased from $1 to $2. As of FY 23, it's estimated that there's still 1,600 in unassigned assigned port fee funds available. And for FY 24, it's estimated that there'll be 12,000 available at the end of the fiscal year. FY 25 includes a breakout of estimated assigned funds for port fee. I feel like I've said that word a billion times, but you'll see why in a minute. There's 1.7% CPI increase included for the harbor. And except the harbor masters requested that we do not do an increase for the daily fee, as it still remains one of the highest in the states. And looking at a recent breakdown from the Alaska Association of Harbors and Ports, Harbor Masters, whatever the acronym is, we are about double for daily fees than any other harbor. Our annuals are right on par. Our monthly still a little bit high, so we could and we can, when we discuss the fee schedule, we can discuss this more in detail. It could be that even the dailies and the monthlies aren't increased and just the 6-month and annuals see the 1.7. But in discussion with the harbor master, she said, really, it's just that daily that we need to be aware of and try not to price people out even further, since it's so far beyond what a normal daily rate is. The 2-month reserve target goal for unanticipated expenses has been, we're anticipating will be met by the end of FY25, and that the harbor will be in the black by the end of FY24. And I did put that in parentheses, if not sooner, because in seeing some of those initial audit figures, it looks like she just might barely squeeze into the black by the end of FY23. So I'm hoping we have that to you guys soon. The credit card fee was removed as discussed. And as a large major fund, the audit reallocation had only a little impact for this fund. We also have no transfers for deferred maintenance for Jackloff from the deferred maintenance fund for Jackloff due to the fact that those funds are going to be utilized as a match for the Jackloff Bay dock replacement project. Any questions so far on harbor?
Yeah, Heidi, I just have a comment real quick.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, obviously the 10,000 that you guys are talking about for carpenter hours, I think that's long overdue. It needs to happen for the plank replacement. We know that's bit us a few times here. And then yeah, I mean, I think there's probably a multitude of council members and other folks in the community that have expressed their, and visitors that have expressed their not unhappiness with the daily rates. Yeah, they are expensive, and I'm trying to remember back to some of the conversations when we added, when we tried to get our mortgage rates in line, how we ended up with such high daily rates. I mean, I think it's probably it was the thought process on, having the transients pay more to help offset the locals. Yeah, that's obviously I get that line of thought, and I probably voted for it. Obviously it starts to, become a problem sooner or later when if your visitors decide not to stop because they don't, want to pay that high rate and just decide to go on, to Homer, then yeah, it's shame on us. I mean, yeah, there's a fine line there where we have to make it to where it's not, it's not so expensive that we're going to start losing, going the other direction. I don't know how we fix that at this rate, but.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I really appreciate those comments, because that's something that myself and Harbor Master Jan Peterson have talked about, especially this last week as we go through this budget process, or the last couple of weeks. We did talk about if there should be further discussion on lowering that fee, and when we can have that if the council wants. Layla's here, so I don't want to overspeak for her. She can chime in if she wants. But the conclusion that we came to per the harbor master was that the fee has been set for over a year now. People are used to it. They understand that that's what it is. And so if it sits there and stays there, that's fine. But we don't want to shock anybody by continuing to raise it. If you guys want to explore lowering it, let us know and we can present some scenarios. But certainly we don't want to raise it at this point.
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead, Vivian.
Yeah, great report. I guess I'm trying to remember way back when, or at some point, did we ever talk or discuss? I know we did. I'm not sure where we went with it. The idea of separating out Jackaloff Dock as its own account and the harbor, and having the two separate. At one point we discussed that just so we knew what was going on at Jackaloff, a clear picture. So the money that was the maintenance money that was left over from Jackaloff got put into the account for the harbor, for the harbor, and it got kind of a skewed up. Does anybody remember that conversation, or Heidi, you may? But
yes,
we go ahead. Yeah.
Through the mayor. Yes, thank you. That did happen. That money is in its own account. It just, if, I wish I had a full example of the budget in front of me, but if you look at FY 23, you'll see it in there. It's listed below the harbor, and then that money is those those funds are transferred into the harbor when those repairs are needed to be made for Jackloft to cover it. But those funds themselves for the deferred revenue of Jackloft are sitting on their own, and they are not included in the harbor fund balance, their own balance for Jackloft. And certainly that is a consideration. I think I put it in here as well. Establish a fee schedule and management plan for Jackloft Bay dock upon completion of the replacement project. And so that can be part of the consideration, as well as just doing its own budget, if that's something that the council wants to look into seeing happen.
Yeah, thank you. I guess I was just trying to figure out if it would behoove us to have two separate accounts, Jackaloft and then the harbor in town. That's a conversation we can have in the future. Thank you.
Well, and I think with the grant, we will start seeing that when those funds come through. That's probably about a year out. But I bet we'll be having this discussion before FY 26, unless you guys want to have it sooner.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anything else? I did want to show you guys for harbor, when I talk about port fee, I did do a deep dive for that history, because I wanted to just assess where the city had been. We knew we were close, but seeing that those funds are specific to the improvements and operation of the harbor is how they are listed. That's their assigned purpose. And if you go back in history, you can see that as of FY 23, the difference between the revenue received from, and these are fairly close, but they are still estimates based on previous audits and finance reports. So the total was 86,299 at the end of FY 23, and the expenses were 84,689. So really close. I'm hoping to actualize that in the budget moving forward. That difference of 1,610 at the end of FY 23. For FY 24, where we sit right now, we received $26,302 per last October, November. And then we're looking at about $13,900 in expenses, which is a little bit more than was budgeted and will be addressed in a mid-year budget adjustment. And that's because we are trying to finish up some much needed projects at this point with the current staff that we have before we move forward into the next fiscal year. Still, that gives us a difference with the FY 23 difference and the difference from FY 24 of about 14,000 at the end of this year, which is where I was saying, even if we included in those in that expense chart 14,000 for expenses out of those assigned funds for FY 25, but including that 10,000 for labor, we'll still have a difference of about 12,000. So we could even do more if the council wants. But I thought 10,000 was a nice conservative number that we can budget. We were initially thinking about going out and looking for somebody who wanted to come in and help with that. And speaking with our fill-in part-time operator, Johnny Gruber, he said that was something that he would absolutely love to help with. And he did some small repairs last year on the harbor. So if that meets the needs of the council and we can get it budgeted, maybe we even do a mid-year adjustment and put some in a little bit more in before the end of the fiscal year. And then he can start on it right away. Well, not right away, but in the next month or two. And we start really getting some of those repairs knocked out. That I do, I definitely feel that those funds are there.
Hey Heidi, one last quick question. on the finger pins, maybe Layla can answer that. Was it just the pin itself, or was it the brackets that the pin goes through also? I know there's a wear point there, and I don't know if it was just only on the pin from the up and down and then all the slop in them and moving. Is it both? Is it all pieces, or just the hardened pin itself?
Can you hear me okay?
No.
So it's actually all three components, and they're
Okay.
actually being replaced with two brackets on each side instead of being a long pin down the middle.
Okay, so it's two smaller pins instead of one big long pin.
Yeah, it's two smaller ones on each side, which make them a lot more stable.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Nope. Sound. So it's an improvement as well as a replacement.
Yes, it is.
Gotcha. Cool. All right. Thanks, Layla.
Thank you.
Any other questions on harbor? Are we a go to kind of work towards some harbor repairs this year and maybe even in the current fiscal year? Okay. Right. Hold on. Mr. Mayor, we do have a public comment if you want to allow that at this time. Otherwise, we can wait till the end of the presentation. Oh, you're on mute. You're on mute, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, whoops. Sorry about that. Yeah, let's go ahead and do that while it's still germane to the current topic.
It seemed like the harbor was plenty full on Labor Day and some holidays. So I don't know. The idea is maybe just keep it the same rate and then just call that the holiday rate and then lower the rate for other days. It's just an idea.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so moving on to BHO. You will see, okay. Again, FY23, we're waiting for that audit. Revenue holds steady with a 1.7 increase, and the expenses are decreased with that audit allocation by fund size. So you could see that's a pretty dramatic decrease in expenses from FY24 to FY25. If we look at what those expenses are, overhead, not including employee wages, is 14,000. Employee wages includes a little bit of administration, and then the BHO related wages is about half and half. And with the exception of the decrease in audit expenses, everything else just remains fairly steady across the board. This is about what it takes every year, about what we spend in order to operate this fund. Considerations. Additional budget was included in FY24 for labor, and that hasn't been actualized. They were able to do a lot of cleanup, and I feel confident that cleanup will continue and brush. We'll get some more brush clearing done in the yard this year without a significant increase. So FY25 is more consistent with the FY23 wages and standard operations and maintenance of the boat storage yards than FY24. Audit fees were decreased from the 8980 to 1950. Like I said, the 1.7 CPI increase. No community assistance program funds were allocated to the BHO fund as previously done in FY22 and FY24. And then there are some considerations. One of them being, I wanted to point out that the 2-month reserve target goal for unanticipated expenses has been met. It's been met for a long time. In fact, if council wanted, you could utilize some of the unassigned fund balance for BHO as long as we continue moving in a positive direction. In future years, we have estimated 96,000, and I say estimate because we're waiting on the last audit. 96,857, and that would be minus the reserve target that could be potentially available for capital projects. So I know we've talked about in the past, maybe fixing some of those electric boxes, doing some other work to the boat launch ramps. This is, I mean, you guys are getting geared up to be a pretty good time if you want to start talking about capital projects. And that doesn't have to be today, but if that's something you want to see, let me know and I can present a presentation in the near future that goes over some of those options or of utilizing funds for projects like that for the BHO. And so that's what I have. Unless you guys have anything else for me, I'm going to turn it over to Jan, who's going to talk about her water and sewer rate study. And if you guys want to provide feedback on looking into decreasing that daily port fee or just the daily harbor rate or just keeping it. It sounds like you guys are okay with us moving forward with some construction. But anything else, if you guys think it through or have any thoughts about it, let me know as we begin to finalize this a little bit more.
Okay, thank you, Heidi. Appreciate the presentation on those funds and what kind of where we're at and where you're headed.
And I apologize, I don't have my screen set up for sharing, but it's in the laydown. So I don't know if Heidi can maybe keep sharing hers so that the folks online can see. And I don't have anything on my screen that's not in the laydown, so you're not missing much, put that way. So Heidi asked me a while ago just to kind of do a multi-part look at our water and sewer rates, and we basically looked at four different steps. We looked at our current system. What are we bringing in revenue and water and sewer? And then what does that look like with a couple of potential rate increase scenarios? And then we also looked at our old system, which breaks service types down a little bit further, because a little more level of detail in terms of what people are actually being billed for. There was also requests from the community to look at a flat rate option. And so we've got that in there. And then I've got a rate comparison with how Seldovia kind of stacks up against some other communities. So those are the 4 steps I was going to look at. And I'm just going to start off looking at our current system. So that should be the first page in your laydown. And I apologize, there's not a title on it. There should be. But you'll see water at the top and then FY24 and kind of a pinkish orange column and then a blue column and a gray column. And this is not looking at all water and sewer revenues, and it's not even actually looking at all utility revenues, because we do have some kind of special customers, nonprofits, utilities, things like that, that have their own rate schedule. So this is just looking at people that are basic residential rate, or that fall into kind of the 3 standard commercial categories. And so you can see we've got 186 customers right now that are residential customers. And that's not 186 households. That includes things like Seldovia House that I think counts as like 16 or 18 services. Yep. So they're included in that number. And then we've got 9. So what I did here is I took the number in July, figuring, all the businesses functioning at their highest capacity, because we do have some businesses that change rates during the year depending on whether they're operating or not. So this is sort of taking that July look. We're charging everyone the most we would charge them during the year. And so that time of year we see 9 base rate commercial businesses. So basically real simple businesses are basically doing one thing. 16 that fall in the small commercial. So they're operating more than one service out of a business or out of a building. And then large commercial is 3 or more services. So they might have, a couple of, it might have a storefront and they may have a residence there. And then they may also have, say, an apartment that they rent out by the night. It's just as an example. So for an FY24, our estimated revenue for water is 192,000, a little bit more than that. And then for sewer, looking at just under 94,000. And again, this is not capturing all the revenue, especially for water. That's just the commercial and base revenue. If looking at the 1.7% increase, which is the Anchorage CPI, is where we got that number. That would be an increase for water of $3,266 roughly, so a total of $195,395. It would add just under $1,600 to sewer, so $95,420 total there. And then we also just to see what it would look like, we also looked at a 3% increase. So that would bring water to just under 198,000. So an increase over FY24 of $5,763. And then for sewer, it would bring sewer to 96,640, an increase of about $2,800. So if we keep everything the same and just do a percentage increase, that's what you're looking at for those categories. Again, reiterating that there are other revenues that don't fall in there. So that's not the total revenue. It would just be the total for our standard commercial system. The next page, if you look at, I just called it kind of our old system. So this was basically FY19 and previous. We had a more complicated system that put businesses into categories, decided a rate for those, and then say if you had 3 different businesses operating in one building, you would be charged. And this is my understanding. I never worked in this system, so I'm kind of learning it after the fact. But if you had a retail store, you would pay the retail store fee. Plus, if you had a B&B operating upstairs, you would pay that fee. And then just for fun, let's say you had a gas station somehow in the same building, just to be as improbable as possible, that would have another fee. And so it's a lot of looking at each individual building, totaling up what are the things going on there, and then figuring out what those costs would be. So it involves a lot more homework for each individual business that you interact with. In terms of the rates, obviously, we don't have that system in place right now. So the way I got the rates was I looked at what was the rate for residential in FY19, what was the percentage increased FY24, and then I applied that percentage to the categories for businesses. So it really is pretty theoretical. Just assuming that those would be increased at the same straight line amount that the residential was increased. And so down at the bottom, there's a monthly total, an annual total, and then that compares to what I estimate those same businesses would generate under our current system. And so you can see there is a fair difference, but I do want you to keep in mind that this involved a lot of guesswork on my part. For instance, B&Bs and so on. Each bedroom was charged at a certain rate, and then a bedroom with a kitchen was charged at a certain rate. And a lot of times I don't know exactly how many bedrooms people have in their house. So that category especially was a lot of inferring, a lot of best estimate on my part. Some of the other things also, again, just best estimate, looking at some of our office buildings. I didn't tour the office building and count the offices. I just kind of, from the best of my memory, last time I was in there, how many can I count? So please don't take that as a concrete number. Please understand that it is an estimate. But that is kind of what the old system looked like. And I'll discuss that a little bit more when we talk about the rate comparison, because this system is still in place in a lot of other communities, is what I discovered. And then if we look at the flat rate options, this again is just looking at those same categories, not factoring in any of our nonprofits, utilities, et cetera. Just looking at base commercial, small commercial, and large. And so you can see in that just kind of where the trends of revenue have been across from FY20 on, the percentage changes and so on. And then so the way I came up with the flat rate was I took our estimated FY24 revenue, projecting forward to what we should see by the end of June, multiplied that by the prospective 1.7 CPI. And again, there's nothing magic about that. That's just, I kind of wanted to pick a number for FY25, so that's the one I picked. And so that's how I got that estimated revenue for these categories in FY25 of just over 78,000. And then added up again, how many of those customers do we have in each of those categories? Divided the 78,000 by that to get the number that if every commercial customer paid the same rate, what would that rate need to be to get the same amount of revenue? And then down below, we looked at what's the change from FY24. So what does that mean? If we went to a flat rate, what does that mean for someone paying base commercial, for small commercial, and for large commercial? And so you can see for small commercial, it's not much of a change at all. $3.13. It's a pretty significant savings for large commercial, and it's a fairly significant bump for base commercial, which is of course what you would expect. So that is, again, you can see the disclaimer that that is just for the basic utility service. It doesn't capture any of the fees for water tokens, marine highway service, water turn-ons, any of those things. It is just commercial basic utility service. And that also assumes that everyone stays at the same rate throughout the year. Obviously, the projection of revenue assumes that. And so, again, there's a little bit of fudge room there because people do change back and forth in rates. So, and then finally, in the last tab, this is the rate comparison. Spent quite a bit of time on this, and yet the numbers, again, they are still fuzzy because the first thing I learned was there are many communities that do not have their their fee schedules on their websites and do not make them easy to get, even if you call them. So, and especially the smaller communities. So you'll see that every community I have there for comparison is larger than Seldovia, and that's strictly a function of those are the rate schedules that I could get. And the ones that, and also that were not metered. You know, a lot of communities are metered. And so then of course this doesn't factor in. And so those all had to set aside. A lot of communities set fees just based on the size service line you have. If you have a 1-inch line, the fee is this. If you have a 2-inch line, it's that. And so those were not something I could really compare. Some do a combination. They charge your service line and then an additional fee based on what type of service you're providing. The colors are basically just if it is in blue, our rate was lower than the average I found for the other communities. If it is in that kind of orangish pink, then our rate is higher than I found for the other communities. And again, and if it's in white, there just was not really enough data. And so I have those in there just because those are categories that we either do have or can anticipate having in our community. But they don't fit the way we currently bill. So you can have an office building and maybe you've got, let's say you have 40 people in there and several bathrooms and so on. But if all you're doing is being an office, then according to our fee schedule, you'd be, I think, a base commercial. Okay.
Oh, we have special rates.
We
for
do.
that.
I'm saying if that didn't exist.
Yeah, if we didn't have the
Right.
special rate
If we didn't
category.
have special rate.
Okay.
And that's exactly why we have the special rate, basically. So as you can see, the numbers are really kind of all over the map. Like if I look at a restaurant with 40 seats in Cordova, it's $190. And if I look at it in Wrangell, it was $656. And it's just because it is really kind of challenging to interpret how their rate schedules are written. But it did give me I felt like it did show that we were fairly in line on a lot of things, even with our very general categories. So that I thought was encouraging. And then I did also look at residential, and we were fairly in line there as well, which was nice to see. I don't have a lot of deep conclusions. I realize this page in particular takes a lot of just looking at and thinking about. And of course, it's also the smallest print in your handout. So apologies for that. But it just gives you a number of options. And one thing I guess that I was really struck by was how challenging some of those rate schedules were to apply to our system. And largely that's because we don't have very many businesses that are only doing one business. Most of ours are some sort of mixture. And so that makes it a little more complicated to apply.
If I can just jump in with a thought as I'm reading this, and it was perfect you just said that, because between talking to other business owners, and then I'm always, I'm one of those interesting ones as well. And so I'm always like, I was looking at those scenarios like, oh, where would I pop in here or there? And I think it's hard because I know we need to make sure we're doing a good job that we can keep things where we're at, budget and balance. And not be confusing, but also as we're thinking this, I don't have the answer, is making sure that we're not kicking ourselves down the line by putting anything that's going to make that person in town that has an idea of something they want to do or try to not want to do it when they look at the cost. Because that's when you decide you're going to start a business or add something, a service, especially as we're looking at like the commercial business district and wanting to encourage that, it's a very fine line. I don't have the answer, but just having that in our head, how do we create that balance on how to encourage people to do more, but also make sure that we can be in balance. And that is also why I know I did the rural utility management training, which was mostly not, but towards the end it was, but there was some talk about it. And a lot of us that were in it, talking about, many of us are in this situation right now with these old systems. And the reason that these rate scales are all over and some are probably looking a lot higher than others is they're having to make these fixes to infrastructure. The cost of running these infrastructures have gone up, like for us, and then there's fewer people, and the people are the ones having to cover that cost. And so it also had just occurred to me, the more we can do on just, I guess, educating the community that that's the situation we're in right now. We're working through this so that there's that communal understanding that we're not just trying to raise rates, that we have this service and it's not like we can get rid of it and it has to pay for itself. And that's my feedback.
I'd like to jump with a comment on that. Thank you, Ashley, for bringing that up. And you obviously are going to say it way more eloquently than me. So as I look across here and I see Seldovia, Kenai, Seward, Wrangell, Cordova, Ketchikan, I've talked to this till I'm blue in the face in the past. There's one obvious common denominator that jumps out at me immediately, right? That is the population difference. We are a fraction of every one of those communities, being less than probably 10% of the smallest of all of those, which is probably either Seward or Cordova. So yeah, I to understand, I get it. I mean, I've been on council a long time before I was mayor, and yeah, we're in a conundrum because of our small population, totally understanding, that we have to pay for everything. I 100% agree with Ashley, about stifling, innovation, people trying to figure out how to get by, right? Jan made a good observation. There's very, very few businesses in Seldovia that do just one thing, right? Well, that's very simple because there's very few single line item businesses in Seldovia that can be successful year round. That's just a fact. Unless you're printing money or something and you got it figured out, great. But most of us that are in business in Seldovia have figured out that in order to pay all these bills that keep coming in, let alone make any money, that you actually have to do multiple things with your very valuable piece of property, most of us which purchase them on the waterfront, in the business district, or a good chunk of those, right? Not to say that there's not plenty scattered around with other businesses. Let's see, I've lost my train of thought.
Add one more thing, Mr. Mayor, because I think you would like to hear it. Most of those are also cruise ship ports.
Yes, that's absolutely no question there. No question there, right? The other thing is I would argue that if you actually look at the bit just from a, you can call it philosophical, theoretical, whatever, but I think if you actually, and we've talked about water meters, sure, there might be a difference, at your 3 months of high use. But I mean, I could look at the businesses, the types of businesses we have, even lodging businesses, right? Versus a single family residence with 2 or 3 kids that, let's just say 2 kids, right? I mean, the water in a single family residence basically never shuts off. I know at most of these businesses, there is not a lot of water being used. I mean, there's just not. I mean, you can look at the type of businesses they are, unless it's a public restroom or, you're washing dishes or something. All the rest of these, there's even if you're operating it out of your house, just for that 3 months, there might be a spike in your usage, but for the rest of the year, it's going to be pretty darn quiet. So, I mean, I just don't want, I get it. It's a business. Businesses get hammered with all the fees, right? They take the brunt of everything. And I know that discussion is going to come up on the planning side of things, the comprehensive plan, ways to make, business more favorable. I don't want to get off topic, but yeah, I would like to see definitely something done here at some point where the businesses that have multiple things going on are not penalized, because I believe that's what it is. It's a penalty for operating more than one line of business. So, because I honestly don't think it has anything to do with actual usage. It's just the fact that you're a business, so you must be making a ton of money, especially if you're doing more than one thing in your business. So that's my piece. Open for other comments, questions.
Mayor Campbell.
Yeah, go ahead, John.
Hey, I just, on a personal note, I'd love to volunteer to put a meter on my place, and so you could do a rate study.
Yeah, we kind of went across that a number of years ago. We talked about that, taking a few businesses to do that. Yeah, and obviously you'd have to do it year round, right? To make it matter. So, but yeah, that's something that was talked about, discussed. We never quite got there. Certainly something we could, entertain in the future. Jen? Jennifer Swick, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I'm confused here. We're not looking at going back to breaking everything out, are we? Or was that just for example?
Just for example, rate study, kind of where we've been and where we're at. And does anyone want to make a move to go back in any other direction?
Oh yeah, no. That was the worst, working in the office and trying to figure out what people were doing with their buildings. And I think that's why it got changed to the small and the large. And like you just said, I mean, I never really thought about it. Absolutely. The amount of water that I use in my home with my 3 kids is holy cow.
Incalculable.
Yeah, he told me to do a load of laundry at work this winter so that we could move some water through that building because we don't really use it. Yeah, it's absolutely not the same. So, yeah, but I understand that I'm a retail business. Sure, I have a public bathroom, but it doesn't get used by my, 10 customers a day. So there are other businesses that do use a lot, but like you said, it's mostly in the summer. I mean, I don't know what the answer is. I know that going back to breaking it out is it's not ideal for anyone to have to deal with. And yeah, you count in offices and everything was impossible, especially when there's remodels every other year. Yeah. Yeah. I'm gonna turn my mic off before you listen to my kids some more.
Yeah, go ahead, Vivian. Thank you, Jen.
Yes, yeah, all good points. This has gone on. We have worked on this budget. I mean, I've been on council, I don't know, 15 years, and before that, going to council meetings. And so where we are right now is through a lot of trial and error, and it's not perfect. And it's something that we work on to make sure, bottom line, that we're balancing the budget. We have enough, and just as been spoken before, we just don't have the population to support and reduce prices on things. But all good discussion. It's just, this has been, we have gone through this so many times over and over. And what was before, as Jen spoke of before, it was a nightmare. And that's why we're at where we're at with the base rate, the small and the large. But it's always a work in progress. So good ideas and good possibilities are always welcome. And but again, we're looking at our limitations, and that's kind of the crux of it, our limitations as a community for population. But thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Vivian.
I have a question for office staff. And maybe it's been talked about in the past. Have there been any options looked into or brainstorming on ways of subsidizing this fund? Because that was one thing that did get brought up. A lot of small communities use gaming to fund their utilities as an example. And I wasn't sure if that's something that we should start to look into, since I don't see our population growing enough in the near future to make a big dent in this. And if there's a way that we can, because we want to support growth of businesses, but we want to also support families coming here, both. So it's like, we don't want to be like pointing the gun at anybody, but is there somewhere else that we can then bring in? And maybe that's our thought process, being creative, because it is something that's being done in other places like ours.
Yeah, I think that certainly something to think about, entertain. Yeah, I think anything that we could come up with to help would be good.
And I guess I'm just going to think out loud, and I have no idea if this would be a way to do it. But because I had been thinking about that, because I wasn't sure how those gaming activities work in those small areas. But as the chamber is trying to do different things, I don't know if that's something where the Chamber of Commerce can team up with the city and have something where they're supporting a gaming activity that offsets utility costs for the city. And that in turn is supporting businesses as well as the whole community. So just some bigger picture ideas and thoughts, ways of drumming that up.
Yeah, one other thought too, when you look at the number of businesses here, yeah, I understand there's going to be a commercial rate. It's going to be higher. I get that. You've got your base commercial, you've got 9 small commercial, 16 large commercial, 9 as well. You've got the rates established, the water sewer rates established. I mean, I don't know. We didn't run the spreadsheet on it, but I don't know how close it gets us if you did say rework those numbers a little bit to make it a little more equitable along the lines of businesses, to where you're not penalizing, the folks that are doing numerous things out of their one building. Say you raise the base residential by, the base commercial by, 10% or something, and you bring, whatever you bring, so base rate commercial, there's 9, if I'm reading this right, and then there's 16, there's 9 base rates, and then 25 that are either small or large. What about bringing, the small and the large down to match, and just have, I mean, you pick a happy medium somewhere there that's, you know, not going to break the bank, but that or you have two rates, you know, if you do truly have a small where it's just one and then it's just multiple, it's not 2, 3, 4, whatever, or three and above, to give those folks that are doing that. And full disclosure, yeah, I'm one of them, absolutely. But you know, I don't see an issue with that. I just think they offer a little bit of relief. And again, maybe it's not this year that we do it, but I think it's worth looking at a spreadsheet to what that looks like. And I'd even do it and offer it up, you know, at the next meeting. I can do that, no problem. But I think that's just one thought, and we've probably talked about that before. I just don't know if we've ever truly looked at those numbers. I know there was a lot, like Vivian said. I know we beat this thing to death, but that doesn't mean that, you know, things can't change as economic times continue to get worse and worse for small business in America. They're not getting better, I can tell you that.
Mayor Campbell?
Yeah, go ahead, John.
I just, you know, so many of these rate adjustments, I guess I struggle with them. For example, the port fee. You know, if we just had an increase of numbers by even 50%, you know, there's be so much more revenue. On a personal note, I own a business in town, like a lot of people do. We tried it for 2 years, and what I found is it was a financial loss too big for me to deal with, to be open year round. We purchased it with the intentions of being open year round. What I'd really like to see the community as a whole do is to do more about increasing our window of opportunity for the whole community. You can watch my point of sale system and see when the summer revenues are acceptable for me to operate that business, and when it's time that I start losing money. And the window, an 8-week window, is not going to do it. Could you imagine what my sales tax would be if we had a 16-week window or even a 32-week window? And what the revenue change would be for the city instead of putting these fees on top of businesses? We need to find ways of getting more people here. I don't want to see this place become Seward or any of those big cruise ship towns, but we're barely surviving here, barely. And it looks like to me they got a deficit of what, $6,000-8,000 in the water. And when we get into the budget here, we can talk about it. But there's funds that the allocations, we should probably talk about moving them around a little bit. And I'd love to see. Another thing that frustrates me is I can't tell you how many homes I see sitting in the city limits that we only see the residents or the people that own them here 1 or 2 weekends out of the year. So why aren't those rates a little different, encouraging people to, instead of being a summer getaway cabin, why don't those rates encourage maybe a little bit more full-time people living here? Instead of, you know, can the tax rate be different on those homes that are only filled once a week for the entire year? I could go on and on.
Yeah, thanks, John. I see Jen and Meg both have their hands up. I think Jen, yours was up first. Go ahead.
So another, I'm guessing it was an unpopular opinion because I don't think it obviously never went this way. Since this whole business district is fresh in everyone's mind now, there was no traction ever with setting the water sewer rates based on your zoning. Whatever happened with that discussion? Because I know it's been discussed.
Through the mayor.
Yeah, go ahead.
Excellent question. So we don't have a maintenance fee. Everybody in this community, whether they're residents or they're a commercial service and they're using their property or they're not, because they are connected to the system, they pay what that service level would be. So if it's a residence, the residence is paying a residence. If it's a building on Main Street in commercial business district, it pays a commercial business rate. So that was implemented, and everybody, I mean, there isn't a discount for sitting vacant and not utilizing the service because you are connected and it costs money.
Okay, so everybody who's in a commercial zone has a commercial rate?
Correct.
Okay, there, and who distinguishes big versus small?
Well,
That
hold on. Let's clarify. I don't think that's accurate. Maybe it is, Heidi, but if you're in a commercial residential on the slough and you
No.
don't, okay.
We're just talking commercial business.
Okay,
Because
just commercial business.
because commercial business has the caveat, the restriction that it has to be a business.
Correct.
So it has it may be the base rate commercial, but it has a commercial rate associated with the building because it's a commercial business first over everything else.
Okay,
But
there's not
the whole community pays either a commercial or a residential rate, whether they're using it or not.
Okay. There's not one then, I guess, for, not that I'm saying I want to do this, but there's not one for commercial residential. There's not a separate one.
No, not at this time because the district has fluidity and you can either be a commercial or a residential. You're not held to a standard.
Right.
So they would just get a residential, or if there was a building that was very obviously a commercial and not then it would just be a commercial.
Right. Okay. Oh, I didn't really realize that. Oh, I guess they did. Maybe that was like that. No.
Yeah, I think we
maybe I'm
clarified that.
forgetting.
It's been 3 or 4 or 5 years, but somewhere back along the line, we clarified that. And we had I know myself and Vivian were there. We had a pretty extensive discussion on that, making sure that everybody that was in that district, there was no loopholes in the commercial business district.
Okay. Okay. Thanks.
Okay, thanks.
Something that was brought up during the commercial business district subcommittee was the idea that the rates could be set high or higher with an increase and then a discount provided to those that were open or living, occupying a space, similar to how we had to conduct a survey for the Slough Sewer Improvement Project, and the determination on whether funding was available through the state was by residency, and that was 10 months occupancy. Residents had to have 10 months occupancy to qualify for funding for the project. And then the ones that did not meet that need, the city had to, we're going to have to do it again, but had to seek additional funding to cover those services. So that was something that was brought up during that district meeting, was if the city council wanted to entertain, that's another idea, that you could just raise the rates up across the board and then offer a discount for full-time occupancy. I don't know. I haven't looked further into the legitimacy of that. But if it's something people were interested in, we could explore it.
That's probably just going to lead to other problems, but maybe there's some merit to it. I don't know. Meg, you got your hand up?
Yeah, I'm testing my mic too. Can you guys hear me?
Yep, loud and clear.
Okay, great. First off, I wanted to say thank you, Jan, for adding barbershop and beauty parlor to these averages. That's wonderful. Also, just kind of confirm or just adding to Jeremiah, John, Jen, and Ashley's comments. Same with Vivian. I would really like to see maybe any kind of further discussion or breaks for those who are pursuing and opening opportunities for business owners. For myself, or as myself, my landlord is doing a lot in the community, and I know that she gives me breaks. And just for the opportunity for me to have a business inside her business. So yeah, we're all just trying to make it. So if we can find any loopholes to give anybody any kind of breaks who are doing offering multiple services and opportunities, I'd really like to open that for further discussion.
Yeah, Meg, I think you probably didn't realize what you said, but I don't know if you're looking for a loophole. I think the way to solve this is it's just simply a change, right?
That's right. I didn't mean
yeah.
to say a loophole. No,
Yep.
wrong word, verbiage.
Yep. No,
Yeah.
it's all good. It's all good. Yeah, no, but I get your point and what you're looking for, but yeah, no, this is the correct process on how we fix this for folks that are, trying to run and operate a business. So yeah, nope, good comments there. Yeah. And I commend, the Body Felts for what they're doing over there. Yeah. And they're, they've got a big building, creating opportunity for smaller businesses to come in, and there's another business that just opened up right across from you. And that's fantastic, right? I mean, every single little business that opens is going to generate more dollars for the city in sales tax.
So, Mr. Mayor,
Yep.
some quick numbers. If you increase the base rate 10%, it'd be 156.76 monthly. And then if you combined small and large, and did an average between the two, it'd be 261.77 or 78, if you round up, which would increase small by $73 and say 36 cents and decrease large by $73.35. And then
a better way might just to be say, so you're still penalizing one group. Maybe a better way is just to go down, put all the large, because the larger business down at the current small rate, right? Or whatever that business rate is, the newer small rate or something.
So have everybody at small?
Well, I don't think we got to solve that right now. I think we run a spreadsheet with a multitude of scenarios on there and see what the delta is, over on the side. And then, whether if we just tag this on to the next work session as, whichever items come up on the next work session, we could just, have a little tag on that to show that, or even at a council meeting on a discussion.
How about we tag it on in 2 work sessions? Next work session, we can cover general fund and some of those other business incentives. And then the following one will be fee schedule. And we can come back to this during the fee schedule discussion.
Perfect. And I think that'll give us some opportunity to flesh those out a little bit more.
And as we're talking about this more, and especially I know Vivian's great at letting us know, it's just been something you guys have worked really hard on for a long time. It's never perfect. I'm just going to circle back to where I started, that I think we need to brainstorm how to bring funds into this in a different way. And so I'm looking at staff, because I know you could reach your fingerlings out to some other communities that I know are, are needing to do that, and just get some ideas. And I think we're going to have to be creative. And that's part of why I joined council, because I thought it'd be we get to be a little more creative, I think, in a small community. But I think rather than trying to reinvent this wheel, because there's not a whole lot we can do. The numbers are so small. You can only move things around, and it's just going to keep getting bigger. So we've got to find a way to offset that. And if we offset it, then we can change the numbers. We can get some other money coming into that in another way. Then we can start to get creative with incentives in many different ways, whether it's encouraging multiple businesses, rewarding those that, conserve water and can prove it in a certain way, all sorts of different things.
Ashley, I'm glad you're still having fun. All right. What else do we have here?
That's it, Mr. Mayor. I think we have direction to look at some subsidies, and then I guess depending on that, we can look at doing a spreadsheet out of different scenarios for these commercial rates.
Okay, let's see, I don't know if there's anyone else in the audience or anyone online that had wished to comment on this topic.
No, Mr. Mayor, there's somebody in the audience and nobody signed up online to speak on this work
Okay.
session.
Okay, great. Okay, any final thoughts, comments from anyone on council? Well, it'll give us about 30 minutes to between now and the regular meeting to get regrouped for that one. Okay. All right, let's see if that's no further comments then. Thanks you guys for putting all this together. As always, good information. First work session of a number of them to come here on budget topics going forward here between now and let's see, what's our final day for budget passage, Heidi? Somewhere the first week of May, somewhere there? June?
Yes, so it would be end of May.
End of
'Cause you
May,
have-
okay.
Yeah.
So and we're
So it would
coming
need
up
to be-
on the
it
first of
need to be-
April here. So we're
Yeah, it need to be introduced the first meeting of May or in May and then passed by end of May because you have 30 days to the end of the year.
okay.
So
So
the next
basically-
work session, if it works for you guys, I'll do the same overview with the general fund. There's a lot more that is involved with the general fund, and that'll include some of those incentive ideas. And then we can do the fee schedule, visit this back, and then we should have a pretty good overview of the budget in its entirety, unless there's additional things that come up along the way that you guys want to see.
Okay, great. So that gives us just over a month to get all our work done here. So 5 weeks probably or so. So, okay. All right. Well, fantastic. All right. We'll let everybody go get regrouped here and then we'll see you back at 6. So we'll go ahead and adjourn the work session. It's 5:34 and see everyone back at 6.
Okay, see you shortly.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.